Welcome to The Vital Point. I'm your host, Jonathan Schecter. If you're interested in different methods and ways to transform your life, like plant medicines and psychedelics, breath work, meditation, somatic practices, cold exposure, and so many more that we've talked about on this show, then my friends, you are in the right place. This podcast is not just for practitioners. It's also for you if you're new to transformational work and you're looking for more information and direction. The reason I chose the name The Vital Point is to highlight the most important secret to actually changing your life, regardless of the method or modality that interests you. Are you ready to hear it? The vital point is that you have to practice. You can't just listen or read about transformation, and most of the time you're not going to have some sort of one-time life-changing event. Real transformation is a process. I started this podcast to spotlight incredible leaders and practitioners who have experienced their own transformation and have been called to share their passion and mission with others so that you can benefit as well. If you're new to this type of work, welcome. I'm your host, Jonathan Schecter. I'm an integration and transformation coach, breathwork facilitator, been meditating for 19 years, and recently began teaching mindfulness. Breathwork and a lot of the other modalities and resources I talk about on this show are tools that I discovered when I was at my lowest, going through my own transformational journey. I know how much change they can actually bring because I've experienced it myself. I've experienced the transformation that comes from working, practicing, and integrating these experiences, these practices. My intention is not only to entertain, but that something that you hear on this podcast sparks the fire of your own change. When you do feel called to learn more, please send me or the guests a message. We are all here to grow together and support each other. And I hope you enjoyed today's episode of the show. My guest on this episode is my friend, Jessica Posillico. She's a coach and consultant specializing in helping people transform into a more soul-aligned career path. She's also in the process of launching a healing practice, providing Reiki, tarot reading, and more, and is the host of an awesome podcast, Safe Spaces with Jess. She's a friend and beautiful soul and shared her experience sitting with Mother Ayahuasca at Rhythmia in Costa Rica. We also talked about choosing a more fulfilling career and the energetic impacts of the Great Resignation, what's been happening in the world during the last couple of years, going inward and working with our bodies, internal support and coping systems, and how to change them with medicine and our daily experiences is another topic that came up throughout the conversation. It was kind of this theme that was interwoven throughout the entire conversation. And last but not least, we discussed tuning into spirit and our intuition, how to develop that sense, and using receivers like tarot and even movies to tune into our intuition, feelings, and experiences. Many thanks to Jessica for the conversation, and I hope that you enjoy the chat as much as I did. I want to welcome you to another episode of the Vital Point podcast, the podcast that's all about different transformational practices, practitioners, and curiosity. So my guest today is a friend, Jessica Posillico, someone that I've met here and formed a bond with over transformational practice and over our overlap of Instagram, of ice baths, of plant medicine, and was recently a guest on her podcast, The Safe Space. So Jessica, just to welcome you, I don't feel like I would do you justice in doing a full introduction. So why don't you just share with the audience like who you are and all the things that you do.
Oh, thank you so much. You're so kind, my friend. So I am Jess Posillico. I host the Safe Space with Jess Pos podcast. You can find that on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and Anchor. I am a spiritually aligned career coach. I help teachers and higher ed professionals transition from the classroom and higher ed into corporate roles. I help other people too, but that really is my niche, my specialty. Anyone seeking change because they realize their 9 to 5 might be soul sucking, I welcome you to come to me. I'm happy to get your soul less sucked.
That is an excellent calling that I think a lot of people can take advantage of right now. Now, how long have you been doing that?
Great question. So I made this calling of mine. I really hear my New York accent right now compared to yours. So just bear with me. I know that I sound like a sewer rat from Brooklyn. Um,
We're
but
coast to coast.
yeah. So this calling, I made it official last March. I purchased the LLC to my consulting and started formally, welcoming clients to come to me for resume writing. Before that, I was doing that for teachers mostly for free for years because I come from a teaching background. And when I got to the point where I was like, I love helping and I love children and the purity of the things they say. But the system, we all know the system's fucked, right? And
Right.
especially in New York City, there's a very it's a very clear favoritism of which schools and communities get support and which don't. And some people can ride that wave and really fight that fight for a long time. I got to the 6 year mark, and at year 3, I was like, I'm not staying here for my whole life. I have to figure something out. So I ended up leaving teaching. Again, nothing to do with the students. Oh my gosh, funniest students. So I jumped ship from teaching and I went into the corporate education technology role, which ended up, people hear corporate and they're like, oh, you went from teaching to corporate. But for me, everything changed for the better. Like I actually had a life, like work-life balance. Like I didn't have a life when I was teaching. I didn't, the time off, people are like, oh, your summers and your Christmas vacation and all this shit. Uh, those days were spent with me in bed, resting because of depression and anxiety compounded from fighting an uphill battle that seemed like one person could not fight.
Hmm.
So I made the difficult decision to take a leap of faith and seek another role, landed a role in corporate. It changed the trajectory of my life. It gave me time back. I was able to volunteer more. I was able to go back to the school that I worked at and help there because I got paid days to volunteer. And just everything about my life changed. Salary, benefits, my health, my spirituality grew from that. I had time to move from survivor mode to actually living and considering, like, what do I want to create in my life. And so, long story longer, last year I made this resume writing career coaching gig official. And I started to take on more coaching clients at the tail end of 2021 after 3 life-changing sessions with Mother Ayahuasca. And, the spiritual callings now are nonstop. It is nonstop downloads. It is nonstop intuitive inspiration. It is nonstop ideas and change and motivation. And I'm so humbled and grateful. And sometimes when I'm praying and meditating, I'll say to spirit, like, are you sure that I can do this? Like, maybe you should ask someone else. I'm not sure. And I
Yeah.
don't know if that's relatable to you at all, because I know you do a lot to, like, you you are doing the work, the good work.
Thanks. Yeah, it was funny. There was like a video that popped up in my memories or whatever you want to call it thing from like 2 years ago. And it was like one of the first times I had ever gone live. And so I was watching it just curiously, like, oh, like this is an oddity, right? Now it's not such a big deal. But in there, I was talking about like a conversation that I had had with a friend of mine. And this is 2 years ago. So it was like right at the beginning of the pandemic. It was like May of, so we had been dealing with this for a few months. And I remember this conversation, and we were up in the mountains, and we were talking. He said something about like, well, this situation, it's just this opportunity for growth. And I remember like looking at him and being like, sometimes I'm tired of growing. Like, why does it always have to be growth?
Yeah.
And I was just laughing as I was watching that, because I was like, here we are 2 years later, and I don't know if it's gotten easier or better. It's certainly like continued to evolve and change, but I don't think I could have imagined 2 years ago of like where we would be now.
Dude, that hits so hard. Like I think about this time last year, I was still in I everything's different. Every single part of my life is different from this time last year, and it wasn't even a thought in my mind at this time last year that I would move, own a house, take on this added, expand this business in this way. I'm nurturing another, like a holistic healing business at the moment that I haven't launched yet. Um, Career wise, I'm in this, I'm in the in between. There's like before something, it's like something is ending and I see what's starting, but I'm like in between them. It's just everything is different. It's so unbelievable, you know?
Yeah. So you mentioned ayahuasca, and I definitely want to get into that because I'm really curious about your story and your path.
Yeah.
But I wanted to just stay on this topic just a little bit longer, especially like not only are we talking about our own personal experiences, but you are being of service, and you're like helping to nurture others. So how much of like your decision to start this business is coming from like this great resignation, and
Mm,
like what do you make of that? Like how do you see the world changing? And I'm just
yeah.
interested to get your thoughts.
It's such a good question. So at this point, in March of last year, we didn't know that the Great Resignation was gonna become the wave that it's become, right? And over the last 6 months, it's been so overwhelming how many people are leaving their jobs and industries altogether, right? To seek out what fulfills them, whether they're spiritual or not, whether they're awakened or not. People, all of them are doing that, which is so powerful and unpredictable. I guess maybe in hindsight, some people were able to predict that in COVID. Like we're kind of coming out of this cocoon, right? And we're
Mm.
entering this renaissance stage of quality of life. We were cooped up for how long? Able, and if you chose to, sit with yourself and evaluate what's working and what's not. What do I want to go back to? What do I not? And that too, I didn't see, I didn't see the impact coming. And I'm so glad I'm in this role, and I'm so glad to be able to give guidance to those who want it, because most of what I do, I might get a little choked up here, but I'm going to try not to. Most of what I do is channeled from a place of the golden rule, right? Like treat others how you want to be treated. What did I need then? What did I need when I was in a soul sucking job? What kind of words of affirmation did I need to hear? What kind of inspiration was helpful? What processes would have made the transition easier? And I think there's value in that. But now I'm also evolving into the platinum rule of, how do you want me to treat you? You tell me. What can I do to help you? And if I can do that, I'm happy to offer that to you.
I love that. I love, there's this, I think there's this misconception amongst a lot of people when they start to go down their own healing path of like, I have to be completely healed before I can help somebody else. And certainly there's, you can't serve from an empty cup, and you do need to some extent to put your own mask on first before you can, help somebody else. But that doesn't mean that anybody that you're going to, I mean, I think there's very few people in the world that are of service and, healing and holding space and providing these different services and teachings that is fully healed. I've met a couple of them personally that I feel like I'm like, wow, that person is like on another level, and I don't even know if I should call them a person. But I would say like the vast majority of people they're healing themselves, and that doesn't, just because you're still in that process doesn't mean that you don't have value in terms of helping somebody else. It doesn't mean that that you can't be of service. And I love what you said about like you looking at yourself and saying like, what did I need a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago? Sometimes it's like, what did I need yesterday? You know? So I really appreciate that. And yeah, there's so much that you said there that like I feel like we could get into. COVID being obviously like there are people that have suffered and continue to suffer, and I have compassion for them. And like you said, for some people it was also an opportunity to go within, to slow down, to like take a look at what they were doing and how they were living and say like, well, wait a minute, let me think about this. Is this really something that I want to continue to perpetuate? I was living in this pretty bad area when COVID broke out, like, and it was really interesting because my observation was that it was almost like there was like a split, where people had a decision of like, okay, I'm either going to go down this road or go down this other road. And like, my partner and I, we like went within, we started doing a lot of plant medicine.
Yeah.
There was like a lot of intention. There was a lot of inner work being done. And I watched other people that like my neighbors, this one woman in particular who, when I had moved in a year earlier, seemed pretty normal, had 2 kids, seemed pretty like, was just, hi neighbor. Like I watched her devolve into addiction, into mental illness, and like it got progressively worse and more like intense.
Mm-hmm.
And there was something where like I could feel this energy in this environment, like like it wasn't in my house, but it was right next door and it was all around me. And it was like, whoa, there's something more happening here than just this illness.
Yes.
Like there's something happening energetically. There's something happening on a level that I can't really understand from like this 3-dimensional sort of paradigm. To me, like I just tried to lean into it and continue to try to lean into it. And I love what you said, like about some of our calling, some of the things that we are pursuing, they just weren't even there a few years ago. Like you're being able to serve people that are like, hey, like life's too short to be miserable in this corporate hell. So I'm going to go figure out what I really want to do and be happier. There's this whole industry popping up around psychedelics and integration. And, like I have this, budding, integration coaching business that, again, like wouldn't be possible without people that are like, well, I need some answers. I want to go within. I want to rediscover these ancient medicines and wisdom and get deeper into that. So it's just it's a really interesting time. My mom always says that. They're like, there's like an ancient Chinese saying, like, may you live in interesting times.
Wow, Mom.
Yeah. And, there's lots of ways that you could take that. So,
You
so
know,
you,
sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
When you talked about your neighbor, something, it struck me. That one anecdote, right? That one person, that one story, falling into addiction, falling into maybe a less, maybe, behavior that is considered a lower vibration, than what we are here to seek. It makes me, she's one example of a nation, of a world that I think
Mm.
many people fell into that. And I do want to say, like, I'm a big believer in taking the shame out. I
Mm-hmm.
come from a family of alcoholics and substance abusers. And really, like, the only way to heal that is to first, I think, is to take the shame out and be like, yo, sometimes this happens. And it happens because, to me, it sounds like this person never stopped to be still with her insides. And when you're forced to, now you have 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45 plus years of shit coming up to the surface at once, like opening Pandora's box, even if you didn't mean to. I think that that's really common in America, especially with this capitalist grind, right? With
Mm-hmm.
go, 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 work harder, start earlier, end later. Can you stretch yourself thinner? And all that does is cause dis-ease in our system because we're not made to do that. And by ignoring the human part of us and the spiritual part of us, we end up in that situation where now I'm overflooded with emotion that I don't know how to navigate or even put words to, so I'm going to turn it off.
Absolutely agree 100%. Um, you know, are people addicted to things? Well, yeah, you can, your body can physically get addicted to alcohol, it can physically get addicted to heroin, it can physically get addicted to certain substances, but there's a deeper level
Mm,
that needs to be addressed, which is what why are you behaving this way? What is causing you to need to numb out, to
yeah.
need to get away from your reality? And what's the answer to that question overwhelmingly is trauma and pain.
Mm-hmm.
And the body is a system, like we think that we're in control because we have like this brain that's in control of certain things. Like I can raise my hands, I can dance, I can, I have these certain functions. There's all kinds of systems running in the body that we have absolutely no control over.
Mm-hmm.
Try to stop your heart, try to stop your kidney
Yep.
function,
Yep.
try to stop your digestion. Those things, those systems are running without you. And in terms of your nervous system, the body just tries to protect you from pain and danger. And there's things that happen to us when we're children. Some of us, older than children, but a lot of what we're going through is the experiences that we had as children that form certain perspectives, certain perceived dangers, and then we live our entire life.
Mm-hmm.
If those patterns, if those perceptions, if those filters that we're seeing the world through are not addressed, it's just like, hey, keep me from this pain, keep me from this, this discomfort, this dis-ease, you know.
It's so true, and you're actually reminding me of like my first night with ayahuasca, not ayakar. um, it was all patterning. She showed me all patterning, and how impactful it has been on limiting me from living.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a good segue. So I really want to hear about like how you found, like how you got to Rhythmia. Were you like how you found out about ayahuasca? Like, did you have any experience with psychedelics or plant medicine before your Rhythmia experience? And like, how did you get there?
Great questions. So, I did have psychedelic experiences before ayahuasca, but it was maybe only like 2 years prior. Like growing up, I was a big like party girl, drank a lot. I didn't even smoke weed until I was like 18. And in college, but my first psychedelic experience was actually with acid. I just went in big with LSD. And the first time I took acid, she also was showing me patterning. I had like an experience with my partner, my boyfriend at the time, and we had like he had said something that triggered me during the journey. Something like I could change this whole journey around on you. I was very like, I love life and I love earth and I look at the leaves and the trees are dancing for me, right? And he's like, don't be disrespectful, like this can change. And then it did. um and that was the first time I had an experience with a hallucinogen showing me who I had become, which at that time was someone who was afraid to ask for what they need. And what I usually needed at that time was help.
Hmm.
And that came up a few times with psilocybin microdosing, and then like not macro, but like close to macro. I don't even know the metrics for macro dosing now. Um, and it was actually psilocybin that took me down a life-changing journey in and inward, but also grounding. And my psilocybin journeys led me to taking these like spirit-led decisions that ultimately changed my life, which was moving and living where I live in the way that I'm living, and limiting access, limiting, how much access certain people have to me. And in
Hmm.
general, I was a very typical people pleaser in the sense of like, I'll give you all my time even if I feel like shit because I don't want to upset you, because that was like a programming put in me when I was younger. And it was through psilocybin that I also found ayahuasca. Just kept coming up. It like one weekend it just kept coming up. A friend of a friend went and sat with it. I couldn't get enough information around it. I remember reading about ego death before I took acid. Like, I'm a nerd and I'll research everything up the waz, even if that's like Reddit threads. um, but really, Reddit threads gave me an idea of like what ego death is and what it could feel like and what you could experience and how real that death seems. And so then I went on down this rabbit hole of ayahuasca. Couldn't YouTube enough videos, just people's testimonials. Nothing produced, nothing edited fancy, just people on their phone being like, I sat with plant medicine last night. I sat with plant medicine last week. I went to Rhythmia. I went to Solterra. And just, even still, honestly, there are days where I just look those testimonials up on YouTube because people are constantly uploading them. And it's so beautiful to hear. It moves me to a point where I'm like, I feel like I'm weird. I can talk so intensely and passionately about it because it's truly such a life-changing healing. There's like not enough words, Jonathan. There's not enough words. It's just the depth of healing that is available can make you come out with integration work, make you come out the you that you are supposed to be here to be.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So just to kind of like pull up the string a little bit. So you started to learn about it. It started to pop up in your reality. You started to research and get really curious. So when you made the decision to go to Rhythmia, was there like a specific intention? Was there something that where you were like, I need to heal or work on this? Or was it just like, I need to go sit with Mother Aya? Like I know this is what I need to do.
So this is where I'm going to sound a little nutty. I had been in therapy at this point for several years, working with a therapist who was really good about doing a lot of inner child work and shadow work with me. She
Mm-hmm.
also leaned on the spiritual side, so the language was there. Though she's not someone that participates in psychedelics. She's like all about it. She supports. And I had been working on, I had intellectualized enough of my shit to notice patterns and behaviors, but not, I felt like I was not able to break them, you know? It felt like I've done all this talking, but like readjusting the work I'm doing in my life and discipline, but I was like, I'm still feeling all these big feelings and I'm still attracting the same things that I didn't want to attract anymore, whether it was people, places, opportunities, or problems. And at this point, I was like, wait, this medicine shows you how I interpreted it was this medicine will show you the root of the problem and make you sit with it to work on healing it. And really, it's a lot of like relationship dynamics and a lot of heartbreak in my life around people, whether that's romantic or otherwise. And it became unbearable.
Hmm.
And that has been the driving factor for a lot of my healing, is the unbearable pain of heartbreak, whether it's with a partner or a family member or a friend. And in my journeys of like in my rabbit hole discovery, Rhythmia kept coming up from different people I follow, and I just knew, I was like, I'm supposed to go there. And then when I looked into it, the synchronicities were like, I ended up knowing people that went there. I went to college with someone that went there. My mom ran into somebody in a roundabout way who also went there, and she put me in touch with him. It was in this part of Costa Rica that I had been previously, where I remember landing on the plane, landing this wedding years ago, where I was like, I can't explain it, but I'm supposed to be here. I'm supposed to be on this land, this specific part of the world. I'm supposed to be here. And my friends were like, why is she talking so much? It's so annoying.
Can I offer like this interesting insight that I just had
Yeah.
as you were talking? So like you were sharing something very personal and emotional to you. Like I could hear it, I could feel it as you were kind of talking about this pain and suffering that you experienced. And I know that like that's a part of your experience, and um, I can definitely relate in my own journey. As you were saying that, I was like, wow, like how incredible that you had the courage to want to do something about that. First of all, that you were like going to take action to change that, because not everybody does that, first of all. And not only that, like you were willing to go a great distance and go into the unknown, like truly take the hero's journey of going into the cave, so to speak, metaphorically. It's not like your next door neighbor was like, hey, I got this thing. You want to like come hang out and party tonight? Like you literally went to another continent and like trusted this medicine and this calling. And I think that there's something very admirable about that and very courageous. And I hope that, you also keep that in mind, because, it's something to be proud of.
You are very kind. Thank you very much. I let me tell you something. When I was 9, I used to pray to God as a Catholic child that aliens would abduct me because I believed that I would be a great liaison between aliens and humans. So this is like a very, I love your warmth and what you're saying here, but I also look at myself since I was a kid as like just a little off, just a little out there, not in a bad way. I've always been a little different, a little, I always color outside the lines, and I don't label myself as brave. It's like calling. It's just I was supposed to do this. I everything that has happened, I was supposed to do it. It just was supposed to, if that makes sense.
Sure. All right. So you wanted to go to Rhythmia, you get to Rhythmia, and then what happens? Like, I want to hear about the whole experience.
Okay. So first few nights they have you do breath work and they just cleanse you. You don't actually sit with the medicine. And I went in, I think I mentioned this to you on my podcast, that I was a little skeptical about breath work. I hadn't really heard of it before. And the way they presented it sounded like there's some almost like hallucinogenic property to breathing in a certain way. And I found that very difficult for me to believe, which is just my ego protecting me. um, and the first night with breath work, I lost it. I got into a state where my deceased relatives who I was close with were coming to me, and I was, crying, and like, just like so much emotion came out. And they were, my relatives, my nana, my grandma, my aunt were like, you don't need to be the best student here. Like, just be. I'm so like, am I doing this right? Is this too much? Am I crazy that I'm crying? And they're like, just be. And like, hearing that, I like released so much, because I never just I never just show up and just be. I'm always like, how can I make this better? How can I solve your problem? How can I help? How can I, the patterning.
Right.
And so that was like a tremendous breakthrough alone. If I left Rhythmia with that alone, things would still be different. Not as drastically probably, but the breath work alone was tremendous. And then sitting with the medicine is a whole other world. The first night at Rhythmia, the medicine is strong, but it's not as strong as the following nights. It kind of like allows you and the medicine to get to know each other. And the first night was, for me, what came up was all my patterns. So I was just riddled with fucking crippling anxiety. Like, when I say crippling, I mean, we walked into the Maloka, Jonathan, before we even like had a sip of that beautiful barky medicine. I was hysterical crying, got on my mattress, went under the covers, and just cried. People are like talking and socializing, peeing, like learning the Maloka, and I'm just like flipping the fuck out already. The Rhythmia dogs came to me at one point. Like, I was like, even they know I'm nuts. Like, but it was so good. It was so good. She just showed me how much, through me, like feeling it. I don't know how to explain that, but the medicine showed me how much fear was driving my life and holding me back from living. And what's so crazy is that, I had sat with a medium at the start of the year who had said that an uncle of mine who had passed came in and was like, you need to get up and live your life. You're not living your life. And I remember thinking, like, I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do. And at Rhythmia, I was like, oh my God, it's coming again. This message is coming again. I'm not living. I'm just overworking, thinking that that's what I'm supposed to do, and like wait until, I don't know, wait for what? I don't know what I was waiting for, but I was waiting. And, then after the patterning, like the anxiety and the fear came. Some of my deceased loved ones on my mom's side came through, and I say came through, it's like, for me, it was like this, I don't know. What is the word when it's like Star Trek, like holographic? Yeah. For me, it was like a holographic experience with my uncles, and witnessing a lot of the abuse that they endured from my
Mm.
grandpa. And I knew that. I didn't, that wasn't new, but the level of extremes, I didn't know. And seeing how it affected my mom and how it wired her nervous system, and then how that nervous system was directly put and coded into me in utero. Um, and that was all night one. And there was a lot around my feminine and masculine energy, and how imbalanced I was at the time, and how I was heavy on the masculine side, heavy on like the doing, the analytical, the not receiving, the providing. And it's, again, the synchronicities were crazy. Like I made a friend, I had made two friends, Alex and Evan. And Evan is a man, a masculine energy on one side of me, and Alex was a feminine on the other. And each experience, like each journey, like my masculine journey and all of that trauma, I was facing Evan's side. And the medicine like directed me to like face Alex and Beth, I'm saying Alex, face Beth, and face a lot of like maternal and feminine wounding that I hadn't explored beyond talk therapy, right? Like, because how do you know? How do you know how to go into the subconscious and actually like go back? The medicine like can bring you back depending on what you need. For me, it brought me back to such younger days where I didn't know you could remember, pre like 4 years old. I didn't know people could like really store that, but it's all stored. We are computers. It's all stored.
Mm-hmm. We just block it out, like we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, dude.
It's like, oh, we gotta keep you safe, so we're just gonna file that away where you can't get to it.
It's so true. It's so true. It's like on it's like a dark cabinet, filing cabinet in a back closet with no lights on.
Right.
That's what it felt like, and just the first night alone, I was like, holy shit, like this is magic, for lack of a better word. And it healed so much of my inner child that was like always looking for the leader in the room. The medicine was like, you are the leader in the room for you. And that has been, again, life-changing. I got to find more words for these interviews.
You're doing great. Yeah. Just listening to your story, I mean, there's definitely things that I can relate to. I also think it's really, I find it fascinating, like the subtlety of ayahuasca. There's such great care in the container. I mean, when it's done right, like obviously there's people, out there that are like mavericks and not paying attention to set and setting and the container. But like when it's done right, there's such care in little things, because the medicine works in these very, very like subtle ways. Like you mentioned the influence of the people that you were sitting on either side of you. The people in the container, just in total, it's one reason that no offense to anybody that likes large ceremonies, but like I stay away from that shit. Like I don't want to deal with 50 people's energy. Like 10 people is a lot just dealing with that. But like I've had experiences where for whatever reason, like even though every other time and people said like, oh, best practice is like don't sit next to somebody that you are involved with, but like where I've sat next to my partner and like both of us are, it's like, cool, let's deal with our interpersonal issues. So like there's all these little subtle things that can happen within the medicine space that like we're so open and we're so sensitive in that space.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fascinating to me, like how open we are, and the people that, the maestros, the curanderos, the teachers, the leaders that are actually able to see and work on that level of subtlety. It's like,
Yeah.
it's really like this surgery,
Yeah.
that's happening at a very, very like subtle level. And I don't know, it's just something that I find really
It's
fascinating.
fascinating. It's fucking mind blowing, dude. Like, it's real magic in real life. Like, anyone who combats or like has something to say that's not fully, you know, on board, I get it, because at one point I was there too. And now I'm like, no one could change the perspective I have on what this is, what those people are offering, what this earth gives us. It's all so like overwhelming to think about the power that's here,
Right.
and how easily we can ignore it.
Yeah, and you mentioned, experiencing and understanding how the experiences and trauma in your family got passed down and translated into your experience. That's definitely something that came up for me during my first ayahuasca experience. Like, I literally went back into the womb and could feel all my mom's unprocessed trauma like coming into me, and like like it feeding me, just like if like a baby doesn't have any control over what they're being fed in utero, right? So it wasn't just like the food that my mom was eating, it was like all this unprocessed anxiety and trauma and fear. And the other part of that, like sort of the end result of that, was the sort of the way that I processed it was like, this is like somebody gave you a coat and said, this is your coat, and I've been wearing it for my whole life.
Yep.
And it's like, well, wait a minute, no, this isn't mine.
Yep.
This is yours. Like, I can
Yep.
take it off and give it back to you and be like, no, I don't want this. And obviously it's not that simple, but that metaphor in the medicine space like really worked for me, because it was like, oh, this is something that I've been wearing, that I've been carrying around, thinking that it's mine.
Yes.
And it's not mine, and I don't have to carry it.
And she gives you the opportunity to choose to take it off.
Right. And going into, and going into subtlety and different layers and levels that we can't understand, it's one of the amazing things about doing medicine work, is that as you continue to open, not only do you have the opportunity to get into your childhood trauma, your complex trauma, whatever acute traumas have happened in your life, you start to like peel layers of the onion back. It's like, okay, cool. Now let's talk about our generational trauma. Let's talk about the trauma in my family and my bloodline. Let's talk about the societal trauma, the collective trauma, the generational trauma. And then, it can keep getting like weirder. Like, let's get into other realms and other dimensions and other like, other things that are happening outside of our physical and visual experience. And yeah, like you can go there for all of that, and be this conduit for healing and transformation, through this medicine. And it's like you said, it's magic. And I like that you use that word, because I've always considered magic to be science that we just don't understand or have the language to understand.
Yes.
There was a point in time where different medicine that we use was magic. There was a time where fire was magic.
Right. Right.
Like these are all things that we understand now, and we can go, oh, there, we can put language of science and, understanding. But until we understand it, we're just like, I don't know, it's magic.
It's like if we showed, let me think, if we showed colonial pioneers on the Oregon Trail the most sophisticated aircraft that we have on planet Earth right now, that to them would be like, that's impossible, that's otherworldly, that's magic. And if we remember, like, zoom out and remember, like, there's so much we don't fucking know. There's so much room to welcome the mystery and like allow it to come in to your life. I didn't know that you had a womb journey. I had a womb journey too, my second night. And after I died first, and then I went back to my mom's womb. Did you have like, were you born too?
I don't remember. I remember like swaddling myself on my mat. Like I needed, like I literally felt like this infant where I just needed, like I really wrapped myself up very tightly. I felt like I needed to swaddle. And I definitely remember the experience of being in the womb, which was a very peculiar sensation because it's not something that we actively remember, in our adult like waking lives. It's not like, oh yeah, last week I went to that place and had dinner and I can remember walking in and what the table looked like and the menu and all that tactile sensory information. But yeah, in the medicine space, it was there. It had sensation, it had color, it had like experience. Yeah, it was a trip.
It was a trip for sure.
So like getting into that, like into that magic and into that mystery, how do you think that people invite that into their lives? Because like you working with tarot and working with spirit, to me, like that's what I'm doing when I work with those things. It's like tuning into a different frequency.
Yeah.
And it's magic when it happens, and so like how can people like start to cultivate that and bring that into their life, do you think?
Such a good question. I think a great starting point, okay, and this might seem simple, but I think it's important. A great starting point is listening to your body or your gut reaction or any flutters that you experience in your body when you are presented with things that you are intrigued by. Like what pulls in your interest and makes you go, whoa, I want to learn more about that, or like, let me see that. You don't have to believe it, but like follow that feeling, because that's your body and maybe your spirit, I don't know, it's telling you something. And that I found that by following those paths, I've developed and like a renewed relationship with mind, body, spirit. Like everybody's on the same page. Everybody's on the same page. All of my personalities. I think that I think our intuition and our gut instincts are stronger than they are advertised in mainstream. And that may be intentional, and I don't even have like the capacity and wherewithal to go there because like fuck everybody. But from a place of love. But I do believe in my guts that like listen to what calls you, what intrigues you, what gets you like lit up, like where are your rabbit holes. And if it's a rabbit hole of mine used to be like Ariana Grande and Mac Miller. Couldn't get enough, right? But like, and that sounds so trivial on the surface, but it's not, because what I was fascinated by with the dynamic was two people living in their calling, open about it, making spirit-led decisions, one plagued with struggle, the other with light, and how that can be so relatable and beautiful and disastrous at the same time. So I really believe in the more we listen to ourselves and what we really want, what we really are interested in, go to that. That's like a great building block for trusting yourself, trusting your intuition. And then, there's a lot of healers and holistic practitioners that offer sessions on IG Live or Facebook or over Zoom that gives you practical processes for channeling and practical processes for checking in with your intuition or building your intuition. I recommend those. I did those most of 2020 into 2021. I spent so much time like just trying to reconnect that way and understand like, what is intuition? How do I know the difference between anxiety and fear and intuition? And how do I know what's a gut instinct around like survival and a gut instinct around like knowingness and oneness and assuredness? Does that
Hmm.
make sense?
Yeah. There's two things that you just said that really like stuck out to me. The first one is the importance within the context of integration, the importance of, ayahuasca is a great example because, if you do mushrooms or you do ketamine or your, LSD or something like that, like there isn't so much protocol around the preparation process. When you sit with ayahuasca, there's a whole protocol, there's a whole diet that you follow. You start to, if you're following it, you start to take away all these things that are helping to distract you, that are helping to keep you from being present in the moment. You take away all the bad food that you're eating. You
Right.
take away all the shitty media that you're consuming. You
Yes.
stop you stop numbing yourself out with all these things, and then what happens is, because you're not distracted, you realize how distracted you actually are on a daily basis. And it's like, that's sort of this compass that's pointing you towards, oh, here's some work for me to do.
Yeah.
But what that also does is it lets you have more of your attention back for like these other subtle things that are happening, in your world, right? Like, and as you get more accustomed to that, as you become more normalized to these subtler things that are happening, you can start to practice that. You can start to habituate it. You can start to tune into it stronger of like, oh, wait, something's happening in my body right now. Now, like before you sat with ayahuasca, not you personally, but just, the you that's listening, when you had that sensation, you might go and, have a shot, or, like go and buy something or go gamble or get into, a shitty relationship, like something else to like, because that sometimes those sensations, especially when we start, are uncomfortable. We're not used to them. Our body again is like going like, this isn't safe. I got to, find the way to protect you and to cope. But as you take away those coping mechanisms, it's like there's an invitation there. There's that sensation, that intuition. There's an invitation to like pay attention, and so as you begin to heal, that's like, okay, here's this invitation of like something that I can work on, that I can change and transmute. And then as you continue to do that work, it's like, oh, wait, there's other sensations, there's other intuitions that are happening. So I love that recommend just listening and being open and like tuning in to those sensations. And then the second thing was, okay, maybe I should just stop there because you look like you had something you wanted to add.
I was just going to say, it's really hard for us to slow down, right? But that is the speed at which you will be in tune.
Absolutely. Okay, so the second one was what you mentioned about Ariana Grande and Mac Miller.
Yeah.
Um, so within the holotropic breathwork like paradigm and protocol, there's this concept that everything that's happening to you in your external experience is a projection or a reflection of what's happening in your internal world.
Yeah.
And that when you get triggered by something, or when something moves you, there's an invitation to take that experience inward and get curious about like what does this mean, or like why is this making me react in this way? Why is there this emotional charge behind it? And when I was doing my breathwork training, we read this book by Tab Sparks, who's sort of like one of Dr. Stan Groff's proteges in the holotropic breathwork world. And he actually wrote this whole book around a process that he called movie yoga. And like the whole process is like when you're watching a movie, uh, everybody is experiencing that movie differently
Yeah.
based on our own experiences and based on like what emotional things we are working on or haven't worked on and like getting triggered by. Or and so when you're like watching a movie, it's an invitation to get curious about like what is that experience that I'm having, what is actually triggering me, and like take that experience inward. And the wonderful thing about that practice is it's not just limited to movies, right? Like you could do that with anything, like
Yeah.
relationships or music, or the conversations that you're having with your coworkers or the people that you see at the grocery store or anything, right? Like it's
Yeah.
all this invitation to just be curious and take it inward instead of projecting your experience outward.
Mm, yep.
So
The
I love that.
the answers are in. They're never out. They're always in. But we're not taught to go in, and it creates this fear, I think, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I was, it was so great. Like, I really appreciate that you're tuning in and to your gifts with tarot reading and, connecting to spirit that way. Um, there's, there's so many, synchronicities and signs in the world. And I think that's one thing that starts to become more apparent as we work with medicine, as we start to heal. And like we're talking about, we start to like live in this more authentic, present
Mm,
way. It's like all of a sudden we're open
yeah.
to more experiences in life that are always there.
Yeah.
We're just usually too busy, occupied doing or
Hmm.
running away from that emotion or that experience, trying to cope, to like actually be aware of it and tune into it.
It's so true. I read for myself every day. Like I have my I and I'm always on the lookout. Angel numbers, animals, signs, and now it's like it's getting so intense and deep, almost like more sophisticated now. Where literally yesterday I was journaling, and I always have music on here. And as I was like reading something I had written, the two words I had read actually were sung in the song at the same time that I read it. And like that sounds like such a little, and it's not. It's none of it is. None of it's little. None of it is coincidence. All of it is synchronicity. And like the more open you get, the more it comes in faster and more apparent. And you're like, I'm surrounded. It's been here this whole time, or everywhere, everywhere. And like that's been like a very anchoring gift, because I don't feel alone. And I am very much like in 3D alone. Like I live alone. I live far away from most people. Um, and I just don't ever feel alone in a beautiful way, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's all around us all the time. And I love that you mentioned, how it unfolds as we tune into it, as we like are open to receiving, instead of pushing it away or, you know, writing it off or
Yeah.
ignoring it. It's like that sense um gets more sophisticated. And
Yeah.
that happens within like the somatic and the internal experience as well, right? Like as we like tune into what's happening within us, the sensations and our ability to tune in get more refined. They get deeper. Um, one thing that like that one way that that's manifested for me is like I can feel sometimes when I am getting triggered, when I'm getting emotional, like how old that part is. Like
Mm-hmm.
I can literally tell the difference between something that's happening because of what I experienced as like a 4-year old than something that happened as like a 15-year old. Or something that's happening as an adult, like those have different sensations in my body. They have different like intuitive feelings to them. They have totally different experiences, even though it's all within me. And the to me like that connection with spirit, using tarot or using oracle cards, it's no different. It's like a channel, just tuning
Yeah.
into it.
And that's the thing is, the hero's journey, the reason why the hero's journey is everywhere, every story is the hero's journey, right? We are the ones, humans write stories, humans tell stories. That's how we connect. There's something inside our fibers that is directing that and driving that. And that's why we're all called to it and drawn to it. Tarot and oracle and looking at the signs, it's all part of that same thing. It all comes from the same place. It's your opportunity to look for the pieces that are like telling your story or creating your story. So when people are
Mm.
like, you read tarot, like the answers are in tarot, and it's like, okay, no, Nicole, the answers aren't in tarot. The answers are in us. But
Right.
if you're looking at it as like a tool or a resource and you're open, you can string together what the message is. And if you're being read, your job is to actively listen and actively feel what's hitting you, what words, symbols, numbers are resonating with you. That's your job. I can tell you what's coming through from the cards in my experience and like my channeling, but it's your job to feel it and discern, this is for me, that's not for me, this is for me. It's all, again, it's all inside.
Yep. The answer is going inside on
Yeah.
so many different levels and for so many different things.
Yeah.
I love that. Well, this time has just flown by. It's been awesome.
I could talk to you for hours,
I
man.
know, right? So, where should people go to learn more about you, or if they want to work with you? I know
Yep.
you have quite a few different projects.
Yep. So if you are a teacher, a higher ed professional, or somebody looking to make a soulful, aligned career change, you can follow me at Jessica_Posillico on Instagram. You could also book a session with me or a coaching session with me at www.jessicaposillico.com. You can also follow me if you just want some light and upbeatness in your life. I try to be a place of peace and safety and light in a world that has otherwise shown us it is chaos. And I am in the process of launching a holistic healing business where I'll be offering Reiki, meditation, and tarot readings to the public. If you are interested in a tarot reading or Reiki at this time, you can also just DM me at Jessica_Posillico. For the time being, I am going to launch something formal in the not so distant future.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your experience and your voice, your energy with everyone. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. This is so fun. Even when I
Yeah. And thank you to everyone for tuning in live. Really appreciate you guys. Definitely follow Jessica. And if you're enjoying the podcast, I would really appreciate it if you went to Apple, the Vital Point podcast, and left a review. It would definitely help. We're chugging along here. This is episode 33. So, just the more people that can learn about this work, this transformational revolution that's happening,
Mhm.
the better for humanity and for everyone around us. So yeah, and if you're listening to the podcast on a replay on Spotify or Apple, really appreciate you as well. And please follow the podcast and follow us on Instagram. I think that's where we're mainly active, right?
And you know what? I'd even like to encourage people listening. If you, the first person you think of that you're like, oh my gosh, so and so would love to hear this part of the podcast, send it to them, DM it to them, send them the link. We have to start sharing the goodness, you know?
Absolutely. So, to everyone listening, have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on The Vital Point.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks for checking out another episode of the podcast. I hope that you enjoyed it and that you feel inspired to go and do some practice of your own. Remember that integration and practice is the vital point. Maybe this episode inspired you to add something new to your daily or regular practice, like meditation or breath work. Or you're ready to take that ice bath that you've been dreading, but you know is going to be really good for you. Maybe you're curious to something that you've been called to try, like working with a new teacher or facilitator, or working with psychedelic or plant medicine in whatever way is safe and legal for you where you live. Please reach out to me or to the guest through the links on the show page to learn more about what we talked about on this episode. Subscribe to the podcast and please leave us a review, which really helps the show, makes it visible to more people. And if you're finding the show valuable, please share it with a friend that would also be interested, and share it on your social media. Follow me at Blue Magic Alchemy on Instagram. That's all one word. And if you're interested in learning more about breathwork, or you'd like support with self-development and transformational practice, reach out to me at bluemagicalchemy@gmail.com or Instagram to set up a discovery call for individual coaching sessions and my 6-month transformational coaching container. Until next time, be well, keep practicing, because that's the vital point. Be well, my friends.